hopefully will report about, will share his general ideas with us. Mr. Putin, dear colleagues, the current geopolitical situation is bringing us to the fact that Russian entrepreneurs will have to work under dire conditions, keeping in mind all kinds of restrictions and limitations. But I would like to reiterate that not only the state and the economy and overall have learned to overcome crisis, and the Russian business too, starting from 2014, learned to adapt to crisis, and even more than that, not just to adapt, but to continue developing. Incidentally, the pandemic and the COVID infection pandemic gave additional tools to entrepreneurs, to the government, and we developed together anti-crisis means and systemic means to improve business climate, to improve investment climate. And we are perfectly aware of the fact that the new sanctions are going to be tougher than all the previous restrictions, and they will touch upon a lot of sectors, resources, power, technological equipment, and they will also concern certain types of minerals and spare parts, and supply chains could be broken, transport and logistics chains could be broken, and to curb all these changes, Russian companies will have to work even harder and more efficiently, and to provide uninterrupted work of their enterprises without allowing to lose jobs, to lose employees, and to increase prices. We will have to avoid that. We will have to implement the strategy of import substitution to look for new partners in the countries that are ready to continue cooperating. And a lot depends, obviously, on the timely, on successful activities by the government. And I'm not only talking about hedging the risks, minimizing the consequences of sanctions for the development of the country, to protect country from the new sanction packages, but we should also try to continue developing, and we shouldn't think only about these days.
I apologize for jumping in very quickly and interrupting that conversation with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin. There was speaking with various Russian business officials discussing what is potentially that of the economic fallout from this so-called special military operation in Ukraine. We can learn more right now and speak with Maria Zakharova, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, joining us here during our breaking news coverage on RT International. A very good evening to you, Maria. It's very good to see you today under obviously rather stressful circumstances. The Western reaction has been blistering regarding today's military special operation. Russia has started the operation, as you well know. It started in the early morning hours. The West is condemning what it calls an invasion. Are you surprised by the reaction so far from Russia's professional partners in the West?
Мы привыкли к этому. Мы привыкли к тому, что отсутствует объективность у западных партнеров, и мы привыкли к тому,
we are used to the fact that our Western partners are biased, that there's a game being played, that they're just putting up this front. They make it look like they want to negotiate or something, but actually they have their own plans as regards the international arena and our own country. We've been reassured time and time again that they want to build friendly ties with Russia, but they've accused us of not fulfilling our obligations. And in the recent years, NATO and the Anglo-Saxon countries have been behaving in a very strange and outrageous way, accusing us of the things that we were supposedly not going to do or going to do. So they kept saying that we're going to invade Ukraine, we're going to seize Ukraine, and they refused to negotiate on international global security, to discuss our proposals. They said no. They blocked the process in the contact group that was responsible for fulfilling the Minsk agreements, and Ukraine wasn't even participating in it. And the last drop was yesterday when State Secretary said that the US is not going to negotiate with Russia on security or anything else. And Paris, who said they wanted to be a mediator and a peacekeeper, still France adopted the same stance, and the French Foreign Ministry said that they were not going to negotiate as scheduled. So the talks that were scheduled for today and tomorrow were cancelled by France and the US. And this was done a few hours before the Russian delegation was to leave for Geneva and Paris. That's when they informed us. So these negotiations that were barely happening were blocked by our Western partners, and there were no other options left. As we understand it, the West has never taken the idea of negotiations seriously.
It's interesting, Maria, the comments you're making here do fly in contrast to what Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO chief, said just earlier today when he was addressing the press. Jens Stoltenberg said that Russia closed the door to diplomatic conversations months ago when it came to the hot spot of the breakaway republics. You're saying it's quite the opposite, that Putin has always been trying to discuss all this. Of course, it goes back 8 years. It goes back 8 years to that of the Minsk Protocol agreements. But Maria, please stand by. I just have a very, very important question for you, if I may. Is this true, as we understand, that the Ukrainian President Zelensky has
Mr. Putin, dear colleagues, the current geopolitical situation is bringing us to the fact that Russian entrepreneurs will have to work under dire conditions, keeping in mind all kinds of restrictions and limitations. But I would like to reiterate that not only the state and the economy and overall have learned to overcome crisis, and the Russian business too, starting from 2013, learned to adapt to crisis, and even more than that, not just to adapt, but to continue developing. Incidentally, the pandemic and the COVID infection pandemic gave additional tools to entrepreneurs, to the government, and we developed together anti-crisis means and systemic means to improve the business climate, to improve investment climate. And we are perfectly aware of the fact that the new sanctions are going to be tougher than all the previous restrictions, and they will touch upon a lot of sectors: resources, power, technological equipment, and they will also concern certain types of minerals and spare parts, and supply chains could be broken, transport and logistics chains could be broken. And to curb all these changes, Russian companies will have to work even harder and more efficiently, and to provide uninterrupted work of their enterprises without allowing to lose jobs, to lose employees, and to increase prices. We will have to avoid that. We will have to implement the strategy of import substitution to look for new partners in the countries that are ready to continue cooperating. And a lot depends, obviously, on the timely, on successful activities by the government. And I'm not only talking about hedging the risks, minimizing the consequences of sanctions for the development of the country, to protect country from the new sanction packages, but we should also try to continue developing, and we shouldn't think only about this day, but we should also think about the tomorrow. Mr. Vladimir Putin said that in his introductory speech, and I would like to share a couple of ideas about the possible solutions that, in our view, we will have to apply already now. To the extent it's possible in the current circumstances, I would like to keep the predictability of the implementation of large-scale investing projects. And we continue working and we are engaged in a dialogue with the government. For example, we should conclude working out the mechanism to encourage capital investment activity. I think in the near month we will conclude this work with the government, and we are talking here about using the so-called formula approach. In case when significant parts of this equation are changing within the project, we should use certain formulas that won't guarantee the stability of all the current or future conditions, but it will make these future conditions more predictable in the cases when sanctions serve as a kind of trigger, when they affect inflation, deficit of the budget, and the ruble rate. And we talked about it during the December meeting, and now we are trying to put it in writing with the government, and the practice of applying such approaches could also cover other elements of the economy policies, keeping in mind that the sanctions could lengthen the terms of implementation of investment projects or move them to the right on the timeline to delay their implementation. We suggest to extend the expiry date of the most popular tools, those programs, corporate programs that help to increase competitiveness, regional investment projects, and obviously that would increase the predictability of implementation of all the projects and plans the companies might have on their agenda. Keeping in mind sanctions against the sovereign debt, obviously we need to think about additionally encouraging the demand from the private investors. In Russia, there are more than 20 million investing accounts, and there are a lot of private investing accounts. And the internal finance market that has been developing successfully in recent years, it could help us to curb the sanctions and could give us a new source of working with the state debt. Another way to minimize our financial risks, and one of the possible avenues of development, is the efficient regulation of the cryptocurrency and financial assets. We have already adopted the laws regarding the financial assets. We just need to introduce certain taxes that wouldn't just give a certain impetus, but would relieve certain discriminatory conditions of these assets in comparison with other types of financial assets. As for cryptocurrency, we try to stick to the position of the finance ministry and the government, and we should try to adopt a new legal framework to legally develop this sector of finances. And we think we should continue to encourage the financing activity of private enterprises, and we are not talking about tax stimuli. We are talking about giving companies a chance to implement their investment projects, including outside certain legal entities. So here we are talking about phrasing the notion of holding company that is missing in the Russian laws. We can consider a chance to relieve the moratorium to develop consolidated taxpayers' activity. And here we are talking about improving the quality of the Russian corporate tax legislation that could make us more competitive, make this legislation more competitive, but most importantly, it would allow us to answer the question how much Russian companies really invest and how much dividends they get. You gave us that task, and you wanted our dialogue with the finance ministry and the government to include these components as well. Since now a lot of investing projects of the companies implemented via dividends is not covered by the estimates by the comprehensive investment of the holding structure. In the end, I would like to say that our assumption is that Russia does not shut down. It stays part of the global economy. So obviously, we are not renouncing from international obligations and agreements on the key avenues of cooperation. In particular, we are talking about the energy problems, climate issues, and I think the right thing in this regard would be for our foreign partners to understand that climate projects is not really an area where harsh sanctions should be introduced, because we are talking about the interests of all mankind. So I think we will continue cooperating on a lot of other tracks, including international tax rules and regulations, and we try to show as much as we can that Russia stays a part of the global economy. And we are not going to provoke, including some reciprocal measures to cause more crisis internationally. So I think together we will muscle through any outer risks and challenges, but also inside the country we should act efficiently and work not only on the current agenda, but we should also look into the future. Thank you. Thank you. So here is what I would like to say first, and that's the most important thing to understand. Everything that is happening now, we were forced to do that. We were given no other chance, no other option. The risks in security were so high that we couldn't have reacted in any other way. All attempts didn't bring any fruit, didn't lead anywhere. Honestly, it came as a surprise. We didn't reach any progress, not a single inch even. And I would like to underscore that. So we had to do that. We were forced to do that. Because the risks that we faced were so high that it would be hard to imagine how our country would continue to exist under such risks. And we all understand what world we live in, so one way or another we were preparing ourselves, including to the restrictions and sanctions that we face, so we were preparing ourselves to that. But what I'm going to say now is a very important thing. I would like to react to what President of the Russian Union of the Entrepreneurs and Industrialists said, Mr. Alexander Shokhin. Russia remains a part of the global economy, and in this regard, to the extent we stay a part of this global economy, we are not going to harm the system, the part of which we continue to feel ourselves. We are not going to deal any damage to the system of the global economy, part of which we continue to be, to the extent we continue to be a part of this system. So I think our partners should understand that, and they shouldn't set a goal to push us out of this system. But nevertheless, even with the political ideas in mind, they are going to introduce new restrictions. But in this regard, I would like to appeal to all of you, to urge all of you to understand what is happening, to be aware of what is happening, and to work with the government looking for instruments that will keep people employed and keep the economy developing, coming from the working in the realities that we have. And in the broader sense of this word, the goal of the government is to provide necessary conditions, good conditions to give more freedom. The only response could be to give more freedom for entrepreneurs and their activity. Yes, within certain limits, so that we have a certain predictability on the side of the government, but at the same time, we expect to have certain predictability from the entrepreneur's side. It is obvious that we can't foresee all the political risks, but in the cooperation between the entrepreneurs and the government, you can rely that the government is going to remain predictable and we will continue to be stable. And we have to stay in touch, responding to everything that is happening and to adjust our joint work if need be. I would like to thank you for what has been done so far, even under these tough circumstances, and I hope that under these new conditions, even though we can say that they are absolutely new, but at this stage, I hope we will continue to work as a team and as efficiently.